The courtroom buzzed with a quiet tension, a low hum of shifting chairs, whispered speculations, and the subtle click of cameras preparing to capture every moment. It was one of those rare days where the air itself seemed heavy, charged with expectation, as if the walls had absorbed the countless battles of precedent and principle that had been argued within them over the years. Every eye was on the front of the room, where Jasmine Crockett stood poised, her notes perfectly organized, her posture calm yet commanding. There was a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen, though no one could have predicted exactly how. Justice Stephen Breyer, a figure whose presence alone could quiet a room, leaned slightly forward, his gaze settling on Crockett. He scanned the courtroom briefly, a subtle nod to the procedural formality, and then returned his full attention to her. In that moment, the murmurs faded, the cameras stopped clicking, and the very air seemed to hold its breath. Every person present felt the shift. Something unprecedented was about to unfold. "Your intellect," Breyer said, his voice steady, deliberate, and measured, "is remarkable." The words hit with the weight of truth, cutting through years of assumptions, dismissals, and underestimations. The room froze. Eyes widened. Pens hovered in midair. No one had anticipated that a Supreme Court justice would publicly acknowledge, with such clarity, the brilliance of a young Congresswoman in a setting often dominated by protocol and restraint. The silence that followed was profound, heavier than any applause, louder than any cheer. It was a moment of recognition that transcended the typical formalities, a rare intersection of respect, intellect, and history. Crockett's eyes met Breyer's, and in that brief, electrifying exchange, the entire courtroom seemed to understand. This was no ordinary day, no routine exchange of words. Something pivotal had occurred, a moment that would ripple far beyond the walls of the courtroom and American political culture. Recognition from a figure like Justice Stephen Breyer carries a weight that is difficult to overstate. The Supreme Court is not just a legal institution. It is a symbol, a stage where intellect, discipline, and gravitas are measured with exacting standards. Praise here is not casual, not performative. It is deliberate, earned, and rare. When a justice publicly acknowledges the sharp mind of a young Congresswoman, it reverberates far beyond the walls of the courtroom. It signals to the nation that this is someone whose voice, intellect, and judgment demand attention, even in spaces long dominated by tradition and hierarchy. Yet, the significance of this moment extends beyond mere formal validation. The United States has grown increasingly polarized, a place where young voices, especially women and those who speak with conviction, are too often dismissed, underestimated, or overlooked entirely. Outspoken lawmakers are scrutinized more harshly than their quieter peers. Brilliance is sometimes mistaken for bravado, and competence for audacity. In this context, a quiet acknowledgement from the highest echelons of authority becomes revolutionary. It is more than praise, it is a statement against the culture of dismissal, a subtle but potent reminder that merit and intellect transcend age, gender, and expectations. For Jasmine Crockett, this moment was a culmination of years of preparation, resilience, and persistent engagement in spaces that rarely offer validation so openly. Each carefully argued point, each poised response, had led to this instant, where her efforts could no longer be ignored. The courtroom recognition was not just a nod to her abilities. It was a reaffirmation that her voice mattered in a system historically cautious and hierarchical. It was a rare acknowledgement that brilliance does not have to shout to be heard, that substance will always pierce through superficial skepticism when measured with care. The stakes are not abstract. In a society where public perception shapes opportunity, where historical bias can obscure talent, moments like this reshape the narrative. They challenge preconceptions and force even the most cynical observers to confront reality. Intellect and preparation cannot be dismissed, no matter how loud or intimidating the surrounding voices may seem. But to understand why this silence mattered, you have to understand who is being underestimated. It was not just one Congresswoman in a courtroom. It was a challenge to an entire culture of expectation, an assertion that respect and recognition can, and must, be earned through clarity, courage, and consistency. The anticipation in the room, the weight of unspoken tension, all pointed to one truth. The quietest moments often carry the deepest impact, and in this case, that impact was about to ripple far beyond the courtroom walls. The real antagonist in this story was not a person, at least not in the traditional sense. It was a pervasive, almost invisible force, a culture that thrived on arrogance, smug certainty, and quiet belittlement. It was the unspoken code that measured voices not by the clarity of their ideas, but by the volume of their delivery. It was the tendency to dismiss the young, the outspoken, the diligent, simply because they refused to conform to pre-existing hierarchies. In this courtroom, as in countless others across the country, brilliance was often underestimated, reduced to caricature, or overshadowed by theatrics. In political arenas, this culture had many faces. It was the sideways glance when a sharp observation disrupted the expected narrative. It was the barely concealed smirk when a young lawmaker corrected a misstatement, as if intellect itself were a challenge to be tolerated rather than respected. Jasmine Crockett had navigated this landscape her entire career, and she had seen it play out repeatedly. Moments where her insights were glossed over, where complex arguments were simplified into soundbites to protect the egos of those in power. It was a world that favored noise over nuance, confidence over competence, and the appearance of authority over its substance. Every dismissive glance, every patronizing interruption, reinforced a false narrative, that the loudest, most bombastic voices were also the most knowledgeable. It was a dangerous illusion, one that allowed shallow substance to masquerade as leadership. In committee hearings, in legislative debates, and in media commentary, Crockett had observed the same pattern repeated. Brilliant ideas were sidelined, quick retorts were mocked, and moments of true clarity were buried beneath layers of performative spectacle. The culture rewarded bravado, punished thoughtfulness, and labeled restraint as weakness. Yet, the contradictions were stark for anyone paying attention. Those who spoke the loudest often revealed their shallow understanding in subtle ways. Missteps in logic, overconfidence in assumptions, and arguments built more on ego than evidence. The very act of dismissal became a revealing mirror, exposing insecurities disguised as authority. Every condescending remark, every scoff at a carefully reasoned point, was a crack in the facade, a signal that the louder the dismissal, the closer it came to being exposed within the courtroom. This dynamic was palpable. Colleagues shifted uneasily, aware that the traditional markers of hierarchy, status, age, tone, volume, were being quietly challenged. The culture of dismissal had trained them to expect one thing, that the established order would prevail. But Crockett's presence, her calm precision, and her undeniable intellect were an unspoken reminder that merit could not be ignored forever. The very force that sought to minimize her influence, this culture of arrogance, was being quietly confronted, and the tension was almost tangible. Even the spectators, both in the courtroom and through the lenses of cameras broadcasting nationwide, could sense it. There was a collective awareness that something rare was unfolding. The intersection of unshakable preparation and a system built to underestimate it. Every scoff, every dismissive glance, only heightened the stakes. The louder the culture of dismissal tried to assert itself, the more exposed it became, revealing a vulnerability that few dared to acknowledge. This was the stage on which the real drama would unfold. Noise versus intellect. Volume versus substance. Tradition versus merit. The courtroom, a place steeped in formality and expectation, had become a crucible in which the culture of dismissal would be tested, strained, and ultimately confronted. And while the world had long been conditioned to expect arrogance to prevail over reason, that expectation was about to be challenged in ways that no one present would forget. Jasmine Crockett's path to that courtroom was not paved with spectacle or the flash of instant recognition. It was built on years of meticulous discipline, tireless preparation, and a resilience forged in environments that demanded both intellect and endurance. From the earliest days of her career, she understood that true influence was earned quietly, through consistent excellence, rather than claimed through loud proclamations or performative gestures. Every lecture attended, every brief drafted, every debate navigated was another step in a journey defined not by attention but by mastery. Her colleagues would often note her precision, her ability to dissect complex arguments and extract their core truth with surgical clarity. Crockett's reputation was not built on theatrics. It was built on results. Her legal rigor became a quiet hallmark, one that earned her the trust of mentors, peers, and eventually, the respect of adversaries who had underestimated her at first glance. Every case she studied, every precedent she memorized, and every procedural nuance she mastered contributed to a depth of understanding few could match. Those who tried to dismiss her quickly learned that behind her calm demeanor was a mind capable of dismantling assumptions with methodical accuracy. Yet it was not only intellect that shaped her rise. It was the countless moments that went unnoticed, overlooked by those eager for headlines or quick victories. In these spaces, empty conference rooms, late-night study sessions, unrecorded debates, Crockett sharpened her skills, honed her instincts, and built the resilience necessary to thrive under scrutiny. Each quiet triumph, each subtle correction of a misperception, accumulated into a foundation of unwavering confidence. She learned to navigate a world where brilliance could be ignored, even maligned, and to transform such neglect into fuel for her own growth. Her journey was also marked by a keen awareness of the stakes involved. In a system that often undervalued young voices, women, and those who spoke truth to power, Crockett cultivated patience and strategy. She understood that timing was as crucial as knowledge, and that impact could not be forced. It had to be delivered with precision, at the exact moment it would resonate most. The courtroom, the legislature, the committee hearings, each became arenas where preparation, not performance, dictated influence. Those who observed her closely noted a subtle yet undeniable pattern. She did not seek to dominate conversations through volume or aggression. Instead, she commanded attention through clarity, insight, and an unflappable presence. The more she was overlooked or underestimated, the sharper her focus became, the more deliberate her engagement. By the time she stepped into the courtroom that day, every comment she made, every argument she advanced, carried the weight of years of preparation. She had anticipated questions, envisioned counterpoints, and considered the perspectives of everyone present. Every overlooked moment in her past had contributed to her ability to shine precisely when it mattered most. Her rise was also a testament to resilience in the face of systemic challenges. The world she navigated was not always welcoming. It was marked by skepticism and quiet resistance to change. Yet Crockett's discipline allowed her to transform obstacles into opportunities for growth. Each setback, each dismissive glance, each subtle underestimation became a tool she wielded with strategic intent, ensuring that when the moment of recognition arrived, it would be unmistakable, undeniable, and historic. And so, when the courtroom fell silent and Justice Breyer acknowledged her intellect, it was the culmination of a lifetime of preparation. She didn't come to be loud, she came prepared. Every step of her journey, every quiet victory, every painstakingly honed skill converged in that instant. The world witnessed not just a single moment of brilliance, but the product of years of relentless dedication, an enduring testament to what discipline, precision, and resilience can achieve when wielded with purpose. The moments leading up to Justice Breyer's acknowledgement were charged with a tension that was almost tangible. The courtroom, already heavy with anticipation, seemed to pulse with the unspoken calculations of those present. Every question asked, every challenge raised, carried an undercurrent of expectation and skepticism. Lawyers adjusted their papers, reporters leaned forward, and aides exchanged brief, anxious glances, all sensing that they were on the edge of witnessing something extraordinary. It was a space alive with friction, subtle yet pervasive, where the weight of history pressed on every statement, every gesture. Questions were posed with polite rigor, but beneath the formalities lay assumptions waiting to be tested. Crockett's reputation as a sharp, precise, and disciplined lawmaker had preceded her, yet there was still doubt in the eyes of many. Could she navigate this room filled with experience, authority, and entrenched power? Could she answer without faltering under the combined weight of scrutiny and expectation? These unspoken questions hovered in the air, invisible yet omnipresent, contributing to a rising sense of suspense that seemed to make the walls themselves lean closer. Crockett, however, remained composed. Her voice, steady and measured, cut through the undercurrent of tension. Each answer was delivered with clarity, each point articulated with calm authority, as though she were guiding the room through a labyrinth of logic that only she fully understood. While some attendees fidgeted, murmured, or shifted in their seats, she maintained a presence that was both grounded and commanding. Her restraint was not weakness. It was an assertion of control, a demonstration that intellect and preparation required no embellishment. The contrast between her composed delivery and the restless energy surrounding her created an almost cinematic tension, a visible dance of anticipation and unspoken rivalry. Every interruption, every probing glance from colleagues and justices alike, was met not with defensiveness but with precise, thoughtful responses. Crockett had anticipated the doubts, predicted the angles of challenge, and positioned herself to answer them with the kind of clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. The room, accustomed to theatrics or assertive displays, was slowly realizing that something different was happening. Brilliance did not need volume. The quiet assurance of her arguments began to unsettle those who had come expecting confrontation, forcing them to adjust to a dynamic they had not anticipated. As the dialogue progressed, a subtle shift occurred. The friction that had seemed intangible began to coalesce into a singular tension, focused entirely on Crockett. Observers could feel the collective inhalation of the courtroom as her points landed with precision, the assumptions and skepticism beginning to falter against the weight of her intellect. Every nod, every moment of silence, built toward a crescendo that no one could ignore. The courtroom seemed to contract in that instant, as if every heartbeat had synchronized into a single, suspended rhythm. Justice Stephen Breyer, the embodiment of measured authority, leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady and deliberate, and addressed Jasmine Crockett with a tone that left no room for misinterpretation. It was calm, intentional, and unmistakably sincere. Every word weighted with the authority of decades spent shaping the nation's highest legal judgments. When he spoke, it was not merely a comment, it was a declaration, a quiet force that carried with it the full power of the institution he represented. "Your intellect is remarkable," Breyer said, each syllable deliberate, each pause calculated to allow the weight of the statement to settle over the room. The words themselves were simple, but their delivery transformed them into something extraordinary. This was not praise offered lightly or for the sake of politeness. It was recognition that cut through the layers of expectation, a validation of years of preparation, resilience, and precise reasoning. In the context of the Supreme Court, such acknowledgement was rare, almost unprecedented, and it resonated far beyond the immediate audience. It was a reminder that merit, when undeniable, commands respect even in the most formidable and tradition-bound institutions. The immediate reaction was almost cinematic in its intensity. Pens stopped mid-scribble. Heads lifted, eyes widened. The quiet shuffle of papers ceased, as though the entire courtroom collectively paused to process the weight of what had just been said. Cameras clicked in slow bursts, capturing not just a single moment but the reverberations that followed. For those present, the silence that descended was heavier than any applause, more profound than any murmured acknowledgement. It was the kind of silence that communicates far more than words ever could, the recognition of brilliance that cannot be ignored, that forces even skeptics to confront reality. Across the room, the subtle arrogance that had lingered like a shadow began to falter. Those who had come expecting to witness a conventional exchange of procedure or performative debate now found themselves exposed. The culture of dismissive certainty that had sought to overshadow Crockett's preparation was stripped bare by a single, sincere acknowledgement. It was a quiet dismantling, a collapse that required no confrontation, no argument, no rebuttal. Arrogance, so often maintained through volume and assertion, had nowhere to hide when faced with the undeniable clarity of competence validated by the highest authority in the land. Crockett's own response was measured yet unmistakable. Her calm acknowledgement, a subtle nod and an almost imperceptible exhale, reflected not triumphalism but recognition of the weight of the moment. She had entered this room knowing the stakes, understanding the forces arrayed against her, and prepared for scrutiny that would test not only her intellect but her composure. The acknowledgement from Breyer validated every moment of preparation, every careful decision, every instance where she had quietly sharpened her skills in rooms far smaller and less visible. The moment crystallized not merely as personal vindication but as a triumph of substance over spectacle, of preparation over performative noise. Observers, from reporters to fellow lawmakers, felt the profound resonance of what had occurred. In a culture often dominated by loud personalities and performative gestures, here was a counterexample of monumental significance. A measured, calm, deliberate display of recognition that transcended ego and command. Breyer's praise was not fleeting. It carried institutional weight that amplified its significance. To hear such words from a Supreme Court justice was to receive acknowledgement not only from a single figure but from a symbol of American legal authority itself. The effect on the room was immediate and transformative. Whispers gave way to thoughtful silence. Skeptics, once poised to dismiss, found themselves reconsidering assumptions. Even those who had approached the session with preconceived notions of superiority or certainty were forced to confront a reality they could not alter. Intelligence, preparation, and measured clarity could not be overshadowed by performative confidence. It was a moment of vindication not only for Crockett but for anyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed for speaking truth with precision rather than volume. And yet, it was more than personal validation. It was an emblematic shift, a subtle reordering of expectations that sent a clear message. The world may be impatient with patience, dismissive of rigor, and enchanted by theatrics, but substance, measured, deliberate, undeniable substance, cannot be ignored. In that courtroom, the silence that followed Breyer's words carried a weight far beyond the immediate moment. It was a silent affirmation of principle, a reminder that intellect recognized by integrity cannot be denied, that preparation and dignity will always pierce through assumptions and superficiality. As Crockett's poised presence absorbed the acknowledgement, the room seemed suspended in reflection. The arcs of tension, the undercurrents of expectation, and the whispers of doubt had all converged into a single breathtaking moment. No one moved to interrupt. No one tried to respond. The quietness itself spoke volumes, louder than any retort could have been. Arrogance had crumbled without a word. The cultural assumptions that had sought to diminish her had been exposed, stripped of power by the sheer force of undeniable intellect recognized at the highest level. Then came the final, almost imperceptible shift in the room, a collective exhale, a recognition that what had just transpired was historic. It was not just a statement of personal brilliance but a demonstration of what happens when preparation meets opportunity, when discipline is met with acknowledgement, and when the underestimated rise to a moment that demands they be seen. The silence that followed Breyer's words was not empty. It was charged, electric, resonating with awe, admiration, and a profound sense of justice realized in real time. The moment Breyer praised Jasmine Crockett did not end with the fall of the gavel. As the courtroom emptied and the cameras captured the final frames, the world outside erupted. Social media ignited almost instantly. Clips of the exchange were shared, replayed, and dissected across platforms. Within minutes, the calm, deliberate acknowledgement from a Supreme Court justice became a trending topic, the soundbite circulating faster than anyone could have anticipated. Users commented, reposted, and looped the footage, sharing the stunned silence that followed the words, a silence that spoke more powerfully than any applause could. Memes and thoughtful threads appeared side by side, each highlighting the significance of the moment, celebrating not only Crockett's intellect but the very principle of merit recognized by authority. Journalists and commentators across the spectrum weighed in, parsing every nuance of Breyer's tone, his body language, and the context of his words. Legal analysts highlighted the rarity of such praise in the Supreme Court's procedural setting, emphasizing how unusual it was for acknowledgement of this kind to cross the boundary from decorum into genuine recognition. Cultural commentators framed the moment as symbolic, a quiet victory against the long-standing culture of dismissal that so often underestimates women, young lawmakers, and voices of conviction. Across television panels, radio programs, and online forums, discussions pivoted around the deeper meaning, that preparation, calm authority, and intellect could not be ignored, even in a world conditioned to favor spectacle over substance. For young viewers, especially those who had felt overlooked or dismissed in their own spheres, the moment carried a profoundly validating resonance. Clips of Crockett calmly commanding respect from one of the nation's highest authorities were shared widely in classrooms, dorm rooms, and offices, sparking conversations about ambition, preparation, and the quiet power of resilience. Comments poured in from aspiring lawyers, students, and activists who saw themselves reflected in her poise and intelligence, finding in her example a roadmap for navigating spaces that often undervalue them. The acknowledgement was more than personal. It was cultural. It represented a moment of recognition that transcended individual achievement, signaling that excellence and persistence are noticed and celebrated when met with opportunity. Critics, meanwhile, found themselves muted by the clarity and sincerity of the moment. The dismissive commentary that often precedes recognition had no foothold here. There was no misstatement to exploit, no exaggeration to ridicule. The calm authority of Crockett, validated by Breyer's deliberate praise, rendered cynicism impotent. The very people who might have questioned her abilities were confronted with an incontrovertible demonstration of competence, and in that confrontation, they had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Silence became the only response available to them, a reflection of the profound disruption of assumptions and the quiet collapse of superficial arrogance. Even the broader political discourse felt the ripple. Columnists and pundits referenced the moment in articles, podcasts, and interviews, connecting it to conversations about equity, respect, and the representation of underrepresented voices in positions of authority. The incident became a lens through which discussions of gender, age, and professional recognition were reframed. It was no longer a single courtroom interaction. It had become a cultural touchstone, a reference point for what could happen when preparation, intellect, and quiet confidence intersect with institutional acknowledgement. By the end of the day, the acknowledgement had reached a magnitude few could have predicted. The viral circulation of the video, the commentary it inspired, and the conversations it sparked reinforced a simple yet powerful truth. Recognition matters. When it is earned, when it is deliberate, when it intersects with integrity and preparation, it reverberates far beyond the immediate space in which it occurs. Crockett's poise, Breyer's deliberate praise, and the stunned silence that followed became emblematic of the possibility that merit, even in a world conditioned to overlook it, can command attention, respect, and admiration. In the wake of that courtroom exchange, the significance of the moment extended far beyond the walls of the building or the fleeting attention of social media. It became a lesson not just for the participants, but for a nation conditioned to confuse noise with authority and performance with substance. Jasmine Crockett's poised intelligence, acknowledged by Justice Breyer, was a reminder that preparation, clarity, and calm conviction are enduring forms of power. Forms that cannot be diminished by theatrics, arrogance, or assumptions. In a society often enthralled by spectacle, this moment reaffirmed a fundamental truth. Substance triumphs over noise, and meticulous preparation always commands respect. It was also a reaffirmation of the ideals upon which America rests. The courtroom, as rigid and formal as it may be, represents the principle that every voice can be heard, every argument considered, and every individual afforded the dignity of attention. When merit is recognized in such a space, it is more than validation for one person. It is a reflection of a system aspiring toward fairness, equity, and reasoned judgment. In acknowledging Crockett, Breyer was not simply offering praise. He was upholding a principle central to the nation's identity: that authority is earned, not assumed, and that intellect and integrity are qualities worthy of public recognition. The lesson extends beyond law and politics. It resonates in classrooms where students struggle to have their ideas taken seriously, in workplaces where diligence is overlooked in favor of louder personalities, and in communities where marginalized voices must work doubly hard to be seen and heard. The acknowledgement of competence, delivered with sincerity and gravity, serves as a reminder that preparation, dedication, and thoughtful action will always carve a path through skepticism and inertia. In Crockett's measured response, the nation saw an example of how dignity and intellect, exercised with patience and precision, can disrupt expectations and command respect without ever resorting to aggression or spectacle. This moment, quiet yet powerful, also inspires hope. It demonstrates that the arc of recognition is not always immediate, that perseverance matters, and that those who invest in understanding, skill, and integrity will, when the moment arises, be seen in their full measure. For those who have ever felt underestimated or dismissed, it offers a blueprint for success grounded not in volume or posturing, but in relentless preparation and unwavering commitment to one's principles. It is a call to believe in the value of patience, rigor, and quiet excellence in a world often impatient for instant display. As the emotional resonance of the event settled, the courtroom exchange crystallized into a moral exemplar. It underscored that true power does not require boastfulness, that intellect and preparation carry weight even when unaccompanied by flair, and that recognition, when earned, can shift perceptions, open doors, and inspire generations. The moment became a testament to dignity, a celebration of intellect, and a reaffirmation that even in spaces historically dominated by noise and assumption, merit and composure will always find their voice. Hope, inspiration, and admiration lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. For the audience watching, whether in the courtroom, at home, or scrolling through social media feeds, the lesson was unmistakable. Excellence recognized is a force that transcends circumstance. In this convergence of preparation, intellect, and principled acknowledgement, the nation witnessed a rare truth: the enduring power of dignity, reason, and measured brilliance. The silence that followed Justice Breyer's words spoke louder than any applause ever could. In that brief, electrifying moment, Jasmine Crockett's intellect was recognized not for theatrics or posturing, but for preparation, clarity, and calm authority. It reminded the nation that true recognition is earned, that measured brilliance cannot be ignored, and that dignity and substance always command respect, even in spaces conditioned to favor noise over reason. This was more than a courtroom exchange. It was a lesson for every aspiring leader, every young voice striving to be heard, and every individual navigating systems that may not always acknowledge merit at first glance. The acknowledgement carried a universal truth: Preparation matters, integrity matters, and quiet perseverance can create seismic impact. When substance meets opportunity, the world notices. And this moment does not end with one Congresswoman or one justice. It is a call to action for all of us. Stand for thoughtful leadership. Recognize brilliance when you see it. Elevate voices that are often overlooked. Celebrate intellect and dignity, even when it requires patience to do so. If you were inspired by this story, carry that energy forward. Share it with someone who needs to witness the power of preparation and respect. Subscribe to stay connected to stories that celebrate courage, intellect, and the triumph of substance over spectacle. Together, we can amplify voices that matter, honor achievement that is earned, and build a culture where recognition is never accidental, but always deserved.